can you remind me if you'll be so kind? Staring out into space, asking God to hear my case. Trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm so glad that you are able to join us today, where we have been focusing on shifting dementia care from crisis to comfort around the world since 2011. I can't believe we've been doing it this long. If you aren't a subscriber, please do so. Just click on the subscribe button and learn and share new techniques that you will get, along with tips and resources from the show and our guests. We interview a range of people, from those actually diagnosed with a form of dementia, to families, to business professionals of all sorts, to singers and songwriters and movie directors and researchers. It's just endless. We truly believe that everyone has the power to have a positive impact on dementia. I'm Lori La Bey, and I'm the host of the show, and I am also the daughter of a mother who lived with dementia for 30 years. So I get the guilt, the isolation, the frustration, and the exhaustion that can come for caring for another person. But I've also been lucky enough to find the path of joy and purpose and passion. So listen and let us help you along the way. Now, before I introduce our guest, I want to do a couple of shout-outs. One is just to Alzheimer's Disease International. Their World Alzheimer's Report is out. You can find that on our blog, but you can find all of our information by going to alzheimerspeaks.com. There's also a survey by the World Dementia Council that is looking to find out from companies and organizations what they are doing to become dementia friendly. They're trying to gather research, and maybe you're doing something, even if it's a memory cafe and you don't have research behind it, they still want to know what the benefits are, because they want to be able to pull funding together and share that knowledge. I also would love to give a shout out to the Memory Cafe Directory. I so highly believe in those. We have over 700 of those now in the U.S., and you can go to Memory Cafe Directory, and you will find them listed by U.S. and also in other countries. Dave has put that together. For those of you that don't know what a Memory Cafe is, it's a support group or a gathering for people with dementia and their loved ones, where dementia pulls everybody together, but it kind of takes a back seat, and it's about building community and friendships. It's just a wonderful, wonderful tool and support for people to have. And last, I want to give a shout out to Stall Catchers. Stall Catchers is a game that you can play where you actually analyze real Alzheimer's data. So how cool is that? And just Google Stall Catchers, and you will be able to find that link there. I always like to yell out to our loyal listeners too, and just thank each and every one of you. Your likes, your clicks, and shares have pushed us out all around the world, and I hope you continue to do that, because it's working together that's making a difference, where we can build a sense of community and collaboration and comfort for people dealing with dementia. And collaboration is the way we're going to win this battle against these diseases. Now, you can also call in on the show today. That number is 323-870-4602. That's 323-870-4602. So please don't hesitate to call in with any questions that you may have. So let's get to our guest today. We are going to be talking about caregiving coaching. And some of you out there might be thinking, what the heck is that? And do I need that? Or yes, I do need that. But how do I find a coach? Well, Sandra Durbin is with us today, and she has been working with families and their aging parents for over 20 years. She has a BS in psychology and a background in medical school social work. And so she's helped hundreds of families move from chaos to calm when negotiating those tense situations that can happen when a loved one is in crisis. Sandra has the ability to really understand what a family is going through and to be able to communicate effectively, not only with family members, but other professionals so that everyone gets a clear action step and is able to formulate a plan. So welcome, Sandra. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Lori. Thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you with us. I think this is a really valuable topic, and people are always looking for resources, but it's a little scary sometimes to reach out. And so, before we get into our line of questioning, I always like to kind of get a baseline for myself and the audience, and ask you this question, and that is: have you been personally touched by dementia in your family or circle of friends?
Not, I haven't personally been touched in my own family. My parents were really young when they had me. There's just not been a lot of longevity in my family, I guess, to say the least. So I had a set of grandparents, but my grandmother died at a young age, and then my grandfather died after a bout with cancer. So I didn't have a lot of experience from my family perspective. Now, of course, I have lots of friends who are going through similar difficulties with their loved ones with dementia and memory loss. And then, of course, I've been in this industry for over 20 years, working with lots of families. So that's really where my breadth of experience comes from.
Okay, great. How did you get started in this industry? What pulled you in this direction?
It's really interesting because I think a lot of people in this industry have a personal story. Like, you have a personal story. Lots of people that I talk to have a personal story. And mine is sort of interesting in that I applied for a job at a nursing facility. I had been working with juvenile delinquents prior to this, and I was really burned out on doing that. And so I had applied for a social work position at a nursing facility, and I got the job, and then I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Because I don't like needles and I don't like blood. So going into this medical environment, I wasn't really sure what to expect. And then what happened for me is that I just fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the elders that I was serving and talking to, and just learning about their history and their life. And I was so fascinated by that and just thought, we have so much to learn here. And I just loved them. And then I started working more with their families and, working on discharge plans and all of these things, and found a way to really help people at a time that they need that help and they're embarking on something new or different. And, just having somebody on your side that can navigate that way for you was really so, I don't want to say inspiring, I'm trying to think of the word, but it just really filled me up, and I loved just being able to help people and work with them on these challenges.
Wonderful. So when you started your caregiving coaching, I know a lot of people, they're just kind of tugged on the shoulder, by people going, hey, can you help me? And it turns out fairly natural. Did that happen for you, or was this a conscious decision to step in and just build a business?
It really was a conscious decision for me. I had been working in assisted living and memory care for quite some time, and towards the end of doing that kind of work, I was working with this woman who she had 3 sisters. They were, and remarkably for this family, they were really all on the same page. That they had a very challenging situation with their dad and their mother had dementia. And dad was, in essence, the power of attorney and the one in control because he was her spouse. And he had a lot of issues himself. that he was in denial about, and he was in denial about his wife's level of memory loss as well. And they were in crisis quite a bit, and the daughters were going to another state to, deal with whatever the crisis du jour was. And she was having a lot of anxiety, a lot of issues around it, just felt very stuck in the process. And the family had made a decision they weren't at that time going to try for a guardianship, or, they didn't want to interfere in that relationship with their dad. So they were trying to do the best that they could. And I realized, a big part of my job was to get people to move into the community, and that's what she wanted for her mom, and her dad would agree, and then he would not agree. And, so they were in this push-pull situation, and I loved working with her. But I realized that my time with her was very limited if she wasn't going to move her mom into the community, that I couldn't just continue to have conversations with her about what to do. I mean, I'd talk to her husband, just all of these things. And I thought she really just needs a coach, somebody where she can talk about her feelings and emotions, and someone who can help her deal with some of those things, but also come to some practical solutions of how to deal with the situation with her dad, and to help them move through should they decide to make any other decision, like if they decide to go for guardianship, or if they decided to do something different, how do we approach that in the best way possible? And so that was really the inspiration for my coaching business, was I just felt there is a lot more help, a lot more insight that people need that they don't always get, even from their friends and family, regardless of how well-intentioned they might be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very, very true. There's a lot of good intentions, but they don't necessarily support what's going on. And then there's some that aren't such good intentions either, that really mix and match up with family dynamics and things as well.
Absolutely.
So can I ask?
That's so true.
When you're dealing with people, have you seen in your 20 years an increase of those who are struggling with dementia?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't know that in the last really couple of years, maybe even as far back as 5 years, I don't know that we're seeing anybody. I don't know that I've seen anybody that doesn't have some sort of memory loss or dementia or Alzheimer's as it relates to, looking at senior living options and those type of things. So I think it's becoming much more prevalent.
Yeah, I definitely do. And people are more comfortable talking about it now too. I mean, I think back, my mom's been gone 5 years, so 35 years ago, no one even knew the word dementia, barely knew the word Alzheimer's, and nobody had any resources. There was nothing in the paper, nothing on the news, nothing on the radio. It was almost like this a scarce disease, and yet it wasn't by any stretch. It just went under a lot of different names back in the day, from hardening of the arteries to, just all kinds of stuff. And so I'm glad that it's come under this umbrella name of dementia, at least, so that people don't feel so isolated and things. Can you tell us, what's the difference between you and other people in the coaching space? Maybe tell us what others do and how you maybe do it a little bit differently.
So absolutely. So I think that people generally think about coaching as like, am I a care manager? Because I think that's the probably most prevalent thing out there. And I can do some care management stuff in terms of helping you with resources, because I'm aware and have knowledge of a lot of the different resources that are out there. What's different is that I'm really focused on the caregiver as a whole, talking about their self-care, talking about their emotions, helping to deal with family dynamics that are going on, helping them to work with professionals. What do professionals say? We have this big mystique around doctors and, the doctor said this or the doctor said that. And there's so many things that doctors really don't know in terms of, they know about the human body and they know about practicing medicine, but there's all these societal things and rules and regulations, even as it relates to your health care, about what will get paid for, what doesn't get paid for, how to go through this track or that track. And so there's just a lot of things that you have to sort of, work in between the lines around. And it's just all of those kind of things that I do from a coaching perspective. But the biggest thing is really dealing with the caregiver's emotions, putting some emphasis on them, setting some boundaries, whether it be even with the person they're caring for or their family members, just so that you can create a better structure for yourself. And I love what you said at the beginning, that you were also able to find the joy and purpose and passion. And that's really what I'm all about. I think that there are ways to find that joy and passion, and that this doesn't always have to be something that's just viewed as a negative, thing.
Yeah, the doom and the gloom gets really old,
Right.
and I learned to ask myself, what's the lesson? What's the lesson? There's got to be a reason we're all going through this, and I just found, I tell people my mom's disease, and she suffered with it for 30 years or lived with it, and her disease is probably the biggest gift I'll ever receive in my life, because she taught me so many beautiful lessons during that process. And I think we all are probably like me. We think we're a pretty good person to start with. But, if we really walk alongside graciously with this, it'll turn your life upside down, but it can turn it upside down in a really, really good way as well, and teach you to let go of things that you can't control, and teach you to embrace what is versus what isn't. And
Right.
those are huge gifts, I think. Huge gifts. When you are you had mentioned, kind of giving people hope and things, are there other ways you feel you differentiate yourself from other coaches in the space?
Well, I will tell you, so I know at the beginning you asked if I had been touched by dementia personally, and I haven't, but one thing that I have, and this is what really resonated with me when I was talking with this client that I had, the woman who was my inspiration for starting this business, because it was about setting some boundaries and, with her dad even, and the sort of crisis intervention that was happening. And so what I related to her was sometimes you have to have some tough love. And my own experience, I have a grown daughter who has had some issues with addiction. And when I was in the crux of that, a lot of the lessons that you were just talking about, walking courageously, by their side, how it will turn your life upside down, how you can learn to find the joy, all of those things. So even though it wasn't a dementia diagnosis that really changed my life, I've walked this path in a different way. And I understand how challenging this can be when you're dealing with somebody who's not rational or just not thinking rationally, or when you think you know what's best for them, right? But you may have to step back and say, sometimes they get to make their own, decisions. And I know that's hard in the later stages of dementia, but in the early stages, sometimes people have to be allowed to make some poor decisions and poor choices. And then you also have to have some tough love that comes out of these things. And so that's the part to me that I feel like really helped me to connect with this person, is that even though I wasn't dealing with the same things that she was dealing with, I had dealt with a lot of those things and really had to make some choices and decisions about my own life. And like you said, find the joy, find the passion, find the lessons. And I feel the same way about my daughter's addiction that you do about your mom's dementia, is that this really changed my life, but it taught me so much about myself. And I mean, the lessons were really invaluable to me.
Yeah,
so I've done the hard stuff. I understand from that perspective how hard and how challenging it can be, and the dynamics between a parent and a child. And just navigating through those.
Well, and every family is different too. So it's not like when you meet one family, you've met one family. It doesn't work like that. It'd be nice, but we're all different. We all carry different grudges, and we have been blessed with different things, and that's just the way it is. Even in the same family, sometimes
Absolutely.
I talk with a lot of families that struggle and say, how do I get my siblings on board? And, my question to them, have you ever been able to?
Right.
Has this been a pattern? And, most of them say, well, yeah, this is how we've always been. Well, then you're probably not going to be able to change that at this stage of the game. And I was, I was the only girl. I had an older brother, younger brother, and they were perfectly content for me to step up and step in. And then, at the end, it was like, well, why do you have all these stories? And I'm like, well, I was there. It was, I showed up. And that realization changed my life, because I was so mad at them, for a long period of time, and for trying to get them to be like me. And we don't want everybody to be like me. I mean, that would be pretty boring out there. But it made me realize again what a gift I got and what a loss they had, and that's what they chose. And not being learning to not be responsible for other people's outcomes. You can only do so much. Do you see that that's one of the big dynamics in coaching that you're dealing with, is getting people to focus on their relationship with whoever they're caring for, and letting go of maybe some of the others if it's not possible to pull them in?
No, that's absolutely probably the biggest bulk of what I do, because at the end of the day, we can only change ourselves, right? So we're never going to be able to get somebody on board, particularly with our agenda. But we can change how we interact with them. And this becomes really tricky with siblings too, because in a time of crisis, in dealing with our parents' situation, we tend to deal with each other the same way we did as when we were kids. Because we grew up, we moved out, we went on with our own lives. We don't have this dynamic of growing and changing over time with each other as adults. So we tend to relate back to the way we used to relate. And if we didn't relate well as children, we're probably not going to relate well now. And so we have to figure out for ourselves, what can we do to change the dynamic? What can we do to work on us? How can we see this situation differently? But it really is, and a lot of it's about giving up that I have to be responsible for other people's feelings and for what they do, and giving up control of how I think things should be.
Yeah, and that's tough. It's, because we take the job so seriously, and we should, don't get me wrong there.
Absolutely.
But sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to just be perfect, and none of us are perfect. Most of the time we're not getting it right, and so that's okay. That's okay to admit that, and just keep trying, keep moving forward with stuff. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting, very, very interesting process that we all go through. It kind of just blows me away some days.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's, the thing about this, and this is what I love about doing this kind of work, is that, to your point, you've met one family with, that has dementia, and they're in a dementia diagnosis with a loved one. You've met one family. And that's what I love about this. There's core things that are the same, that happen with a lot of different families, but the dynamics are always different, and how you get to the end result is always different. I was reading a post the other day from a woman who was talking about her situation with her sister, and the sister was doing more of the caregiving, and I think the person posting was maybe lived farther away or something, and the sister accused her of not loving her mom as much as she did, because she was the main caregiver, and so clearly she loved her mom more, and that just really was hurtful to hear that, or to have her say that. And those are the kind of things that I think we get caught up in, the guilt of it, or the shame of it, or maybe you did have a different relationship with your parent than the one who's doing the primary caregiving. Or maybe you do love your parent just as much, but you can't be there for whatever reasons. And so that invokes guilt and shame and, different things like that. So it's not always just the primary caregiver I work with, but sometimes, the other siblings too, because they have their own feelings about not being able to be there as much as the other person. And then they feel guilt and shame around that sometimes and have their own emotions. And so, and sometimes it's just looking at that. If you are the primary caregiver, being able to accept that people act and feel differently about the situation than you do and allowing those feelings to happen.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And one of the things that I realized was, I had this conversation with my brothers and we ended up diving in a little bit deeper, and it was a huge revelation. And I think a lot of families go through this. One person steps up and is kind of the primary, and then they feel a little bit used and abused and exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
the others, the others are like, go at it. You're doing a good job. That's
right.
how you feel. But what my brothers brought to the table when we had our discussion was really interesting. And they said, well, you're kind of a control freak. And I'm like, well, no, I'm just organized. And they felt they could never meet my expectations. And I said, I'll take some of the responsibility, but I'm not going to take it all, because you could have had this conversation with me before and you chose not to. But it made me realize their perspective of what I do and how I do it is very different from theirs. And it can be intimidating when someone, because sometimes the family, when you're thinking, gosh, I wish they'd help, they're like just in awe of what the person is doing, but they don't really say it, but they're like, well, I don't want to do that because I don't think I could. I couldn't do it as well, and they don't want to let their parents down either. So it's really opening that door to different conversations of what holds people back. And sometimes it's distance. They just physically can't be there to do certain things. Other times it's discomfort with tasks they're being asked to do, like, somebody being asked to maybe bathe a parent, and that's just very uncomfortable, or being in charge of the finances, and they're just not good at that. But those reasons don't seem to be talked about. That's what I see anyways. Is that what you see?
That's a lot of what I see. And then what it comes down to is a lot of blame and shame, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead of having those conversations and really digging through that, we come up with our own thoughts in our head about what's going on with the other person or the other people. And then we sort of, pinpoint them into this hole or this corner of what their thought or feeling is, or why they're not participating as much, when there's a million reasons out there. Definitely some of the things that you just said. I mean, for example, when my grandfather had cancer, he had throat cancer, and he had a trach. And my sister was a nurse. He had come home for like the holiday, and she had a suction his trach and that sort of thing, and she was carrying the part of the machine through to go dispose of the drainage. And I was like, better you than me. And so then she went back. I mean, it was just kind of a joke. I mean, she knew, like, I'll handle all the social work stuff, but you can handle the nurse stuff, Yep. And then she went in and told my grandfather, like, next time that you need to be suctioned, you let Sandy know, because she wants to help you. And I was like, I don't want to help. It really was just her way of being, some little sibling back and forth kind of thing, because I thought I got used to the blood and the needles, but the whole trach things I never got used to. And I was like, oh, no way will I do that. So, sometimes it's just knowing what your limitations are and what you're able to do and being able to speak about it. But I think a lot of times families don't give you that opportunity to do that, or you don't take the opportunity. Again, part of it is because you're so happy the other person has stepped up. You don't want to mess it up in any way by having a conversation, because they might ask you to do something and then you don't want to do it.
Exactly. I just want to mention again, if we have listeners out there that have a question or a comment, please feel free to call in at 323-870-4602, 323-870-4602. Never know if someone's going to be brave enough to call in and ask what's on their
Right.
mind. You know, I think one of the big problems families have is most of us have never had, like, and this might sound off, but that's how I'm going to phrase it, had facilitated conversations for an end goal. You know, families just kind of
Right.
talk and we let our dynamics just go naturally. And sometimes they go naturally off the hook and people can lose their temper or walk out the room or not communicate going forward. And, you know, we haven't taken what we've learned maybe in work into the home to say, okay, let's
Right.
just this is our end goal. How can we all support this? You know, that's usually not
Right.
how it starts. It's usually I need you to do this and you to do that, and I'm doing the and there's one person directing instead of really sitting down. And I mean, I've seen a few families be able to handle it beautifully, but very few are lucky enough to be able to have those open conversations or to even see the same needs.
Right. And I mean, it's so true. Here's the thing. We in a work situation, it's typically a calmer environment. We're trained to handle some crisis situations. We get this training about communication and things. And to your point, we don't bring that into the home. But this usually starts as a crisis situation.
Yep.
Because as a society, we do not, the only thing that we know for sure are death and taxes, right? But we don't
Yep.
talk about money, and we don't talk about death and dying, and we don't have these conversations ahead of time about, what does this look like for our family? Who would step in? How do we do this? That type of thing. And it's very, very uncomfortable. And I totally, get that. I mean, I have two younger sisters, both of them are nurses. My background, social work. So we've got it covered. We'll talk to my dad and say, Dad, I need you to sign a power of attorney so that, we can make some decisions if we need to, blah, 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 whatever. We're very open about it just because of the industry that we worked in. My one sister has been in hospice for a long time. So we're just very attuned to this. And my dad says, oh, you act like I'm going to die tomorrow. That's what he always says because he just doesn't want to address it or talk about it. And I'm like, it's not that I think you're going to die tomorrow, but, it's because what's likely to happen is that you're going to get into a crisis situation and make some decisions. And, and we need to have some guidelines for making those decisions. And so we almost talk, more about it than my dad is comfortable with. My sister and I have had this conversation because being single, I needed some help with who would make some decisions, and we talked about what we would want so that she could help guide my children. And, it was an uncomfortable conversation, but we both know that it's necessary because we work in this industry. But a lot of people just don't take that time or energy to do that because it's uncomfortable to talk about. And the generation ahead of us, our parents were not always willing to have those conversations. These things were kept quiet. You didn't talk about them, all of that stuff. So you have a lot of different issues and challenges that you face, which is a perfect, it turns into then a perfect storm most of the time. Because you've got all these competing things out there happening that we haven't addressed the health issues or how people want this process to look like. We haven't, we come at it from all these different angles based on our own experiences. We don't communicate well,
Yep.
We don't create an environment to communicate well. And it just is a perfect storm for a lot of crisis, a lot of hurt feelings, different things like that. Not that I want to talk about all doom and gloom, because that's the things that I want to help people through, so that they're not always upset, overwhelmed, stressed out, that type of thing.
Well, and when you talk about powers of attorney and stuff, I mean, we are so backwards as a society because we wait till we're in crisis or right before it hits, to address it. So then So then it's more perceived as an end of life issue versus smart living. And it really is smart living because, any of us could get in a car accident tomorrow or have a heart attack or, 10 million other things. And we should be prepared ahead of time. We should give some thought as to how do we want to be cared for and who do we want in charge? Because after the fact's not so good. I mean, I personally, I would love to see this be established at the age of 18, having these conversations and getting these documents in order. Because I've had personally probably 3 or 4 friends who have been paying for a child's health care and something happens to them and they're in the hospital and they can't get any information. And there's nothing, it's a horrible situation. And, so this isn't about old age. It's about any age and just protecting your interest and talking openly on the subject. My folks, or a prime example, we were like, oh, you got to do your will and power of attorneys. And, my dad kind of brushed off, oh, we don't have that much and it can wait. And I said, you know what if Tom and I do it with you? Because we need to update ours. And they're like, oh, you had that in order? Well, yeah. And then that changed everything. Then they didn't look at it as a death and dying thing. And so I just think it's just such a valuable conversation. And then people don't know where to go. So with coaching too, do you help, give them resources in terms of where to go or even titles to Google? Because people, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
People go, I'll just go to an attorney, and it's like, well, no, maybe you want to get to an elder law attorney. Well, what's different? Well, one that does real estate or commercial transactions probably isn't going to be as knowledgeable, if you want and need. But people don't know that all these, little categories exist, or that even caregiving coaching exists. Many don't know because, again, you don't know what you don't know.
No, absolutely. And that's the thing. So to answer your question, yes, I do give people resources because there's so much information out there. And it's always so interesting. I'm sure that you've come across this. You may even come across this when you first, started working with your mom and her situation, is that people always say, there's just no information. I don't know how to find information. There's just nothing out there. And I'm thinking, I have at my fingertips, I could name off 100 professionals right now that could help you, with every single one of your needs. And in this, in this professional industry, I feel like we do a lot to get the word out there. I've set up presentations with elder law attorneys, or, you have all of these things that happen to provide information for people, and nobody comes because nobody wants to talk about these things and nobody wants to face them. And so you put on this event and like 1 or 2 people show up. We had recently a panel discussion with like 6 different professionals, including myself. We had 2 people show up, and it's so heartbreaking because I'm like, we could really help you and get on this path to a better outcome, later on, and just have you learning information. But people don't show up until they're in crisis. And so that makes it so much harder because we don't make our best decisions in crisis. But I do have resources. I do try to help people as much as I possibly can. Whether they use my services or not, I'll certainly at least provide some resources or tell them, where to get the information that they need, because there really is so much out there and every single situation is different. And I can't impress upon that enough, is that, we tend to listen to our friends and our, who sits next to us in the pew in church on Sunday, and their situation might be very different from yours, and they can send you down a path that's not the best path for you. And, even if it's a half-hour free consultation, I'd rather do that and get you on a path that works for you than have you going down a path that's going to lead to frustration because it's not going to be, the same situation as your friends had.
Yeah. So someone had just asked, how do you work with your clients? Are you local or do you go all over?
I typically work with clients through video chatting or on the phone. If they are local to me, I certainly can meet with them. I'm on the west coast of Florida, So I certainly can meet with people, but like a lot of my clients here, for example, their families live, like you may have the parent lives here, but their families live far away. And so we do a lot of phone conversations or video chats to work with them. So that's what I do. So I can work with anybody anywhere.
Okay. And can you explain, because some people don't know what a video chat is?
Oh, yeah. So they have some different video programs. Like it could be like FaceTime if you have Apple products like an iPod or an iPad, not an iPod, gosh, an iPad or an iPhone. You can do FaceTime video chatting on there. There's Skype. There's a program called Zoom. So there's a lot of different things that you can use to do a video chat. And then you're just on your computer and I'm on my computer. We can see each other face to face, so it's almost like we're in person, and we just chat back and forth.
So if somebody isn't computer literate, do you do phone calls?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then when you do coaching, is it just a one-on-one, or could it be like a family that meets with you?
We can certainly do family coaching. A lot of times it's one-on-one because usually there's one person that, reaches out to me. But we do have sometimes where there's some sort of family mediation, I guess, in some ways, or just some community things that we need to work out. And so I can do some group coaching as well.
Okay. And is there a difference in cost for that if it's one person versus a family dynamic thing?
There's not. It's just an hourly rate. So.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you had packages or if you're comfortable disclosing, what you charge, because I know people are curious with those types of things.
Yeah, I usually charge $150 an hour. There are some packages that you can buy so that we can just talk about that. It's really, again, everything is different for every family, so I try not to box it in too much, but I do have some packages that people can purchase for long-term, longer stretches of coaching.
And people
they
might
get a discount.
Yeah, and people might think, $150, that's a lot, and it's like, but when you look at the time that you're saving and the knowledge and the comfort you're going to get in that hour, it's pretty spectacular. Do you? Some people do like texting, and some do face-to-face time. Some do telephone. Do you check in with people? Are there packages that kind of include that to kind of ping people? Because I know sometimes families just get so overwhelmed they forget to reach out, even if they've contracted with something, because they're just so overwhelmed.
Right. No, absolutely. I do text support. There's also another app called Voxer that I can reach out on. So it depends on the person's knowledge of these different things. But texting, calling, reaching out, absolutely, we can certainly do that.
Okay, because today everybody communicates differently. I mean, even with my kids, I can call, but no one ever picks up their phone. I'm better off just getting my thumbs going and texting them, and then boom, they're right on it. And
absolutely,
it's like, well, I sent you an email. Well, I don't check my emails. Well, what? It's like,
yes,
and I'm 60, so I check everything, all the time. And yeah, it's interesting, but it's really important to know how to communicate with people. I was it was actually an anniversary, 50th anniversary the other day, and it was kind of funny because somebody said, I didn't find out till today. I was supposed to, be here, and I was supposed to bring something. I found out the day before. And they're like, I never got the invite. And it's like, well, the person who did the invite did it on Facebook, and that person doesn't check Facebook. So they had not a clue, what was expected of them. And so it's something I think that all families in particular need to talk about. But then when you're dealing with a professional on top of it is really important. I was reading today the National Institute of Health had put down some things for reduce falls. They had talked about, cleaning up clutter and throw rugs and using chairs with arms and, grab bars in the bathroom and good lighting. And and solid shoes. And those little tips, they're huge for people that
They
don't
are huge.
understand, what could happen, or night lights, that'll just automatically turn on as people are walking, so that they can see. Do you have any specific tips that you'd like to share that might be helpful for people who are caring? It might be tips like that, or it might be for self-care as well.
Well, let's see. Off the top of my head, I would say that communication is key. So, and coming up, just having a full discussion with the family about expectations, because that's really where this starts falling apart, is that, you have expectations of what your siblings are going to do, or they have expectations of what you're going to do, and nobody's talking about those expectations. So I think really just managing expectations across the board as quickly and as early as you possibly can, because that really helps to push away any of these miscommunication or other issues that come up later. And And then as far as self-care, I think one of my big ones is set some boundaries, and set some boundaries early on. Now, if you haven't done that, we can go back and help set those boundaries. But I think that we have to be really clear about how we feel and how we express that to other people. And asking for what you need, and being very specific about asking for what you need. So if you need somebody to take Dad to the doctor on Tuesday, be clear about saying, I need some help. Most people, what I hear is they say, I need help. I just need help. But they don't say what kind of help they need. And then people really back off from that, because they don't know, if I offer help, am I there for a half hour or 4 hours? And it's really hard for people to offer help if they don't know what you need from them. So that would be probably my biggest thing, is when you need help, ask very specifically for what you need help with. And I'm actually working on something that I'm going to be putting out there. It's sort of like a help list, so that you can very clearly communicate that. And if somebody calls you, from your group of friends or your family or your church or whatever it is, and says, hey, what can I do to help? Then you can have a list ready to go about what that is, and just keeping that in your sight, so that and you can ask for something specific. Someone can say, what, that doesn't work for me. Is there anything else that you need me to do, or whatever, just so you can have this clear communication, because the more clear we can be, the better things are for everybody.
Oh, that's the truth. One of my favorite stories was a gal who, would go to church, and she was caring for her husband, and she would have somebody come in on Sunday morning so that she could still go to church. And her girlfriend would pick her up and bring her to church, and the people at church would always ask, how can we help? And she's like, oh, it's okay, I got it. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And one day her friend just got really upset with her on the way home and said, you are not okay. You tell me you're not okay. You need help. Why are you turning people down? And she says, well, I don't even know what I would ask them for. So the next Sunday, she picks up her friend, and she hands her a pack of index cards. And she said, I want you to go home after church, and I want you to write one thing on each card that you could use help with. If it's somebody getting your mail, or cutting the grass, or coming to visit so you get your hair done, or taking out the trash, or helping with grocery shopping, or preparing a meal. She's like, it doesn't make any difference. Just write anything and everything down. If you need a nap and just need someone to come. And so she did that. And the following Sunday, somebody came up, said again, is there anything we can do? And she just reached into her purse, and she didn't even know what she was pulling out, and she handed her a card. And she said that was so empowering, because it made her feel good. And it was really truly a surprise gift then when that person did that, because she didn't even know what she was pulling out. But she was just so thankful that her friend called her out on, yes, you do need help. And stop turning it away when it shows up. And we do that a lot. And I think we do it because we feel pressured that we're supposed to handle it ourselves.
Right. No, that's so true. And we have a hard time asking for help.
Yep.
I mean, let's face it, we just have a hard time asking for help. and I love that, and that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm working on, is so they have this sense of empowerment, and so they can ask, because also we forget what we need help with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we might be doing something and we think, oh gosh, I really wish, I had somebody who could help do this. Well, write it down, and then next time, somebody calls, or you see somebody and they say, what can I do? You're like, oh, I have this, little list here, pick something off of it or whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, we do this in so many areas of our life, right? When I had my daughter, my youngest daughter, my neighbors, we came home from the hospital and they called and said, what can we do? We want to bring you dinner. What can we get for you? We do this in so many different areas of life, but when we're caring for, our spouse or our aged parent or whatever, we just think we have to do it all. And that's just not, nobody thinks, well, I mean, I guess, new mothers think they have to do it all too, but there is a lot more support and help there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why we just think this area, we choose not to get the help that we really need.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's that expectation that most of us feel society has put on us, that we're supposed,
Right.
this is our job,
Right.
especially if you're like the only girl or the oldest girl in the family, boom, that's just who everyone says is going to take care of this. But people don't even
Right.
know what that entails. And so
That's
I think that's
true.
where it gets so overwhelming, because you're really running another household. And people don't look at it like that. But,
Right.
most of the
No.
time, that's where it ends up going, especially if someone, really needs, full care, even when they're living independently. I mean, I was doing all the finances for my folks. I was making all the doctor's appointments. I was bringing them to and for. I was, doing the grocery shopping, doing the laundry. And yeah, they looked independent, but they weren't. They weren't fully
Right.
capable of running a household. And so I think that's a conversation that needs to be looked at differently, that people don't understand. And I can say, even for myself, I just started doing that stuff, and you just kind of pick it up. And I have to be honest, I didn't tell my brothers I was doing all that stuff until I got overwhelmed. And then it
Right.
probably came out sideways,
Right.
And,
Right.
and so we have to take responsibility for having the conversations. Or I'll never forget how mad I was at my folks' friends one time. They went out for lunch, and they come back and they go, oh, we're going to go to Texas. And I'm like, you can no more maneuver going to Texas. We're in Minnesota. And they could not pack. They could not carry their luggage. They could not maneuver an airport. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on of how
Right.
that would not work. And yet, and I thought, how can they do this when I'm working so hard? How do they not know? And then I sat down and I burst out laughing. I'm like, because I've never told them. I've never told them that I go over and I make sure that they are well groomed, and that my dad has money to be able to pay the bill, and that someone else comes and picks them up. And when they go out, they can talk about old times and laugh and all that camaraderie, but the skill sets to do all the, executive functioning things were gone, and the strength.
Right.
And so then it was like, okay, I have to start being honest with them now on what's going on. And I thought I was protecting them. And I think sometimes us as families, we do that, where we think we're protecting somebody, but then others don't even know that we need help because we haven't told them.
Right.
And so how can you be mad at somebody when you haven't been honest? But it's hard to look in the mirror sometimes.
It's very hard to look in the mirror. Yeah, it is very hard to look in the mirror and to admit those things and say, oh, I never told you that I needed help, or that mom and dad weren't as independent as you think they are. And even, and to your point, they look independent on the outside, but there's a lot of supportive services that are being offered for them that's making them not that independent. And so if you've got siblings who live far away, they're talking to mom or dad on the phone and thinking, mom and dad are just fine. What is your problem?
Yep. Oh, you hear that all the time,
because they don't
you?
see. Yep. They don't see all the things that you're doing.
Yeah, the day-to-day stuff. Well, I know our listeners are probably wondering, how do they know when they need to work with you, and how do they contact you? We only have about 5 minutes left. So why don't you share that with us?
So I think that how people know that they need to work with me is they're in crisis. They don't know where to turn or where to go. Maybe they're having some family dynamics, some of the issues that we've talked about today. They feel stuck. They don't know how to communicate. They're frustrated. Expectations aren't being met. Any number of those things that could be going on with them. And so those are just, some of the things that will help. Or if they just want to get some resources, that type of thing, I can help them with that too, or put a plan into place of, here's where we are today, and, here's the things that might happen, so that we can just kind of be planning a little bit for the future. So those are different ways that I can help. You can contact me by phone at, my phone number is 404-395-8551. And again, that's 404-395-8551. And then there's also email, which is hello, HELLO, at thecaregiverscoach.org.
And you are also on Facebook and Instagram as well, if they want to follow you or connect with you via those modes as well. Well, thank you so much. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I think it'll help a lot of people. And again, just go to thecaregiverscoach.org again, or give her a holler at 404-395-8551. Thank you, Sandra, so much for being with us and the work that you're doing to help families. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Lori. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, and thank you for listening and joining us here at Alzheimer Speaks, again, where we focus on shifting our dementia care around the world from crisis to comfort. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so, and pass the link on to others as well. I think this was a great conversation that could really help a lot of families, and hopefully you've picked up some new techniques and tips, and definitely a resource to put in your pocket or to pass along to a friend or a family who is dealing with dementia. You can also find more resources on alzheimerspeaks.com. We have tons of things there. You can always click on our initiatives and projects tab and learn about memory cafes or becoming dementia friendly. The list kind of goes on and on with that. And last, if you're a business and looking to really expand your brand footprint, we also help companies do that by leveraging all of our content platforms to increase access to your products, services, and tools. So just reach out to me at Lori at alzheimerspeaks.com, or again, just go to alzheimerspeaks.com, and there's a big contact button, and I would be more than glad to talk to you about details. Thanks so much, and we'll talk soon. Bye now.
Well, hi, I'm Lori La Bey, and I wanted to tell you about Alzheimer Speaks, which is another great podcast. You see, my own mother lived with dementia for 30 years, and I felt lost. Did you know every 3 seconds someone in the world is being diagnosed with dementia? Odds are it's going to hit your families too. We want to help you connect to services, products, tools, research, and stories so you can be prepared. Please subscribe to Alzheimer Speaks on your favorite podcast platform.